We're delighted to have partnered with NordVPN again for this season. We partnered with them last year, and they are, of course, a supporter of Rangers FC as an official sponsor there. And best of all, we can give you an exclusive NordVPN deal. If you go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, you will get a huge discount off your NordVPN plan and one additional month for free. Completely risk-free. There's a 30-day money-back guarantee with Nord. And look, I use this product. I would highly recommend it. I used to work in web, so I know how easy it is to steal people's data, especially if you're using a Wi-Fi system that is a shared one, or you're using 4 or 5G, then your details can be out there. With NordVPN, they're absolutely not. And there are other advantages to it as well. You can watch sporting events that maybe aren't being shown in your region. You can purchase flights from different virtual locations, and they do make your flights cheaper. This is very, very useful. What a price is in the UK isn't the same as what a price is in America or a price is on the continent. NordVPN can save you money. You can buy purchasing subscriptions from other countries at a cheaper price, and you protect your data while travelling and using public Wi-Fi. I keep coming back to that. Anyone who's at the hassle of a cancelled card will know what I'm talking about. So all you need to do is go to nordvpn.com/heart and hand, and you'll get a huge discount off your plan and 1 month additional free, completely risk-free. I urge you to do it. Hello everyone, and welcome to Heart in Hand, the Rangers podcast. My name is David Edgar, and as always, I am your host. And joining me this week to discuss Rangers' 2-1 League Cup semi-final victory over Aberdeen. Yes, I know it's the Viaplay Cup these days, but I just can't. Is first of all, Adam Thornton.
Hello, David.
How are we today?
We are good. Could have done without the old extra time bingo at Hampden yesterday, but other than that, we are good.
And joining me to make up I think a fairly hale and hearty triumvirate is Cammy Bell.
Hi David, hi Adam, hi listeners. Yes, as a nice solid win yesterday, which we're going to discuss, but always a pleasure to be on talking to you.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack actually about yesterday's game. It seemed quite a kind of incident-filled match, but we'll start off straight away with, let's just get it in at the start. You cannot be playing major football matches on a pitch that resembled someone had taken us in a time machine back to the 1970s. That was ridiculous. And it doesn't take, Adam, high-level planning to maybe work out that in January in Scotland, weather gets a bit out there, and maybe don't schedule 2 matches within 24 hours.
Yeah, I must admit I feared the worst when the chat about the pitch on Saturday night, given the rain, etc. It didn't look too bad for the first about 15-20 minutes, and then thereafter it was just an absolute nightmare. You can see the ball bobbling everywhere. I actually didn't notice until watching it back today, but when Scott Wright gets the ball right in that other corner to bring it back to Roofe, there's a huge bobble just before he slides the ball back to Roofe that he managed to control and get the goal. But yeah, just absolutely ridiculous. And you're right, there must be something we can do, whether it's using one of the other venues in Glasgow, whether it's Murrayfield or something, just split it up and do it that way, given that if they're going to have them at this time of year, we're going to have the same problems.
Yeah, definitely. I really don't see why they need to be played within 24 hours, semi-finals. It's not like you gain an advantage by knowing the other result. It's semi-final. You try and win regardless. And it just made an absolute mockery of it. And the thing about it is, Cammy, Hampden itself as a fan experience is awful. Now, whenever we play at Hampden, I don't do press. I like to go in and use my ticket and sing, basically, and cheer the team on. It's not a good experience. As a stadium, no matter where you are, you're miles away. You can kind of see from some sections, but not others. It's cold. It's hard to get an atmosphere going. They really need to do something, and they can't even provide us with a decent fucking football pitch. I mean, it's a shithole, let's be honest.
Yeah, it is, and I think my main issue with Hampden is the ingress and egress as well. I despise being able to try and get to that stadium at the best of times. But I totally agree with you. And the thing that's really odd about it is I could kind of understand the state of the pitch if the pitch was getting used religiously.
Yeah.
But it's not. And listen, you boys have obviously talked about it. Having the semi-finals literally back to back is completely redundant. If you remember, David, it wasn't that long ago we were talking about having 2 games in the same day, which thankfully was kiboshed. However, the bottom line now is that we're never going to get to a stage where we have to change it, because the National Stadium will always try and have that identity. The problem is that the SFA, I think, are the only ones who like it. Every other football fan I talk to, Rangers or otherwise, really dislike the stadium. I was in row B yesterday. I was almost directly behind the goals in the West Stand, and it's just a terrible view. It's just.
Could you not told me that before you came on now? Because I want to talk about the game, and you'll only seen half of it.
Well, the thing, when you could actually move further back once there was space to be able to try and do so. I just like, but no matter where you are within that stadium, there is just I think a really difficult way to build up the atmosphere within the stadium, unless you happen to be winning, or unless it happens to be, again, like I say, an Old Firm Cup final, etc. Okay, that will generate its own. But yesterday, I was right next to the Union Bears, and they were trying their best to be able to generate the atmosphere. I just think the noise just tends to go straight out of the bowl.
It does, yeah.
And it just
same
doesn't
at concerts.
Yeah, exactly, precisely.
It does. It's just it's just a bad football stadium, really, or a bad stadium in general. There's no getting away from it. And you mentioned there, obviously Ibrox, but Murrayfield as well, just significantly better. Anyway, let's move on to the match itself. And Adam, you picked up on a very good point right at the start there, which was the first 15 minutes, which I thought Rangers were genuinely excellent. Hit the post, made a couple other chances, but more than that, dominated, moved the ball at pace, moved the ball quickly. There is something we've seen in this side. There's a pattern to the way it plays matches, which is you get periods like this in games, but not sustained. And you get spells like this where you think, right, that's a good start, go and build on it, but it actually turns out to be the highlight. And in the first half, that's what that was.
Yep. You're absolutely spot on. This pattern, it might not happen in the same order in every game, but it's certainly they're certainly there. I honestly really struggle analysing Rangers games just now, so I might not be much use on this one either. I just find that the team don't seem to take confidence and build on things. I mean, we had a pretty horrendous few weeks before Van Bronckhorst left. We've got Michael Beale in, he's saying all the right words, etc. We're on a great run in terms of results, but you wouldn't think it from the things that happen in games. And I don't want to be too negative on this show, given we got through to a semi-final and we are doing really, really well. We've got the injuries, we're hoping to get players in, we know all of this stuff. But you're right, if we don't get a goal in that little period where we do well, the heads go down, we make a daft mistake, we start to pass side to side and just fling balls into the box. It's a really, really strange thing. I don't understand. Michael Beale again used the word anxious. That's the third time in 7 games.
And said he wasn't quite sure where the anxiety comes from given the run that they're on in terms of results.
And if he doesn't know, we're not going to know. But I just can't get it either, because this is a team that's on a good run. They went away to Aberdeen. They've pulled it out of the fire. They've played Hibs. They should have won against Celtic. These are the same issues that we've had across 3 managers now for me. For whatever reason, in the last 18 months or so, we just can't seem to get any form of run of confidence going. I don't know if the players are now all at the stage where they feel like, with everyone coming to the end of their contracts, maybe there is going to be a big change there. And not that they're going through the motions or anything like that, but I don't know. It just feels like there's a staleness there, and we try and get ourselves up for games, and we have moments in games where we're capable of getting something done because we've got decent players on their day that are individual that can come up with a big moment, or we're better than the opposition and we can get through by sheer force of will. But yeah, it's a strange one. I'm not sure the free-flowing football that we hope we would like to see with the Rangers team, I can't really see it coming to fruition unless we have significant changes to the team. And whether that's in this window or the summer. But yeah, I don't want to be too negative, given it was a fantastic result yesterday, particularly going behind, particularly the pitch, etc. So yeah, we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, and on that, one of the heartening things the last few weeks has been when we've got a goal, we've actually tended to go and get a second, because previously what had been happening is even we would get that goal, say Sakala's header goes in yesterday, that they then sort of stop and revert back to the sort of play that you mentioned. And it came about yesterday, Cameron, with a long ball over the top, which I thought we looked a little too susceptible to in the first half. Aberdeen score, in inverted commas, it's offside, and it was offside, but closer than I thought in the stadium at the time, to be honest. The risk of a high line. And that seemed to sort of end our period of dominance and then let Aberdeen back into the match a little bit. And although Rangers were still dominant in terms of possession, I felt that we were suddenly a wee bit more cumbersome. It could, Adam did mention the pitch really began to cut up pretty badly round about this stage. But it is just that sort of fragility that sometimes is apparent in our game. And I thought in the first half that sort of exemplified in kind of 20 to 45 minutes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't think you can look anywhere else other than the group of players for this lack of confidence, because they've had a manager who's come in now. He's obviously had an impact both on the team and individuals, and you can see that, right? Anyone can see that. I think the problem is that and albeit we're talking about, the League Cup semi-final, I think the problem is that because of the league feels most likely like it's death by 1,000 cuts because we're so far behind. We need to be able to focus on the cups, but we still know the league is there. And it will probably feel to a lot of these players like, to a certain extent, you're going through some of the motions. Whether or not that's, as Adam mentioned, the final point of that is at the end of the season and some players will leave. And there's going to be changes or whatever's going to happen, fair enough. But there's still plenty enough for us to be able to try and play for, and for us as an opportunity to use those league games to try and recover that confidence and to try and build it up again, even if for nothing else, to move it into the cup competitions. But you've said it totally right. It just doesn't appear to be there. And I've said, I think before on some of our shows on our Patreon site, that it feels a little bit like that we've got too much of a victim mentality, and we've struggled to have people to take the accountability from the playing staff and lead forward with a charge, with almost to a certain degree with a bit of kind of aggression, being ruthless, being able to try and do all that. Now, it's easy doing that when you're top of the league and you're winning consistently and you can see some silverware in sight. Well, we should be able to do that now. We're now in the League Cup final. I'm confident that we can go pretty well within the Scottish Cup. And as Adam rightly said, we should have beaten Celtic in the Old Firm game. So there's definite signs of improvement. The lack of belief is in the players. And I think that there's only so much a manager who they know, who they have got a good relationship with already, has then come back to the club. It's not like they're playing for a stranger, but yet they are still, whether consciously or subconsciously, they're choosing to not fully invest in what we're talking about here and be able to go out and play to their full capabilities. Because it's not just the performances have been in dribs and drabs, but we've still got results. And at the end of the day, I think all of us listening to this would take 38 shit performances in the league. As long as we won every single game, we wouldn't care. But the players have to be able to recover it, and whether or not they have to do that internally and decide amongst themselves to do that, because they're certainly not, I think, been influenced by Van Bronckhorst or Michael Beale to shrug it off.
I think it's coming. It's just taking longer than I wouldn't agree 100% because I just think it's taking longer, and you do see it in waves. But it's about coming in with that and being able to maintain that attitude. What I will say is, Adam, they've definitely found an ability to bounce back after a blow, and that was a criticism that I think we fairly levelled at them throughout this season, which is if something went wrong, they almost seem to go, I knew something bad was going to happen, and go into their shells. Yesterday, something did go wrong 5 minutes before half-time. You learn something about your players almost every game. We learned yesterday that Borna Barisic doesn't watch Match of the Day because if he had, he would have saw the goal that Manchester United scored against Manchester City at the weekend. He stops completely. His man is offside, and he is. So Barisic stops, puts his hand in the air, waits for the flag. Doesn't come, because of course it doesn't come. and the Aberdeen midfielder sees that the ball is there to be won. He does watch Match of the Day and makes up 20 yards on him. Ben Davies doesn't react either. Suddenly, he's in, squares it to Miovski, he finishes, and we're a goal down. And I mentioned this on my post-match video yesterday for anyone who watched it, so apologies for the repetition, but just in case. I thought that goal was kind of reminiscent of the one that we conceded to Kilmarnock with Joe Worrell all those years ago, in that it sucked the air right out of the Rangers support, and that we were sitting there watching it unfold going, this can't be what we think is happening. And then it did, and it seemed to go in slow motion. Even the finish itself seemed to loop up and take an age to drop into the net. And we were sitting there going, I cannot believe we have conceded that goal, because you cannot concede that type of goal. It's appalling. You can't. I mean, play to the whistle is a cliche, but it's a cliche for a reason. And in the age of VAR, it's ridiculous to give a goal like that, but you just can't do it.
Yeah, it is. And I think you said earlier on, they were targeting those balls over the top, which I guess makes sense when you've got the fullbacks that are positioning themselves so high. And I'm sure we'll come on to the midfield, but maybe unable to cover in a way that we're used to a couple of years ago. So I think it makes sense for them to do that. They had a bit of pace with Duke and is it Clarkson? Clarkson, Clarkson from Liverpool. So yeah, I think you're right. On the first one, I really, really hope McGregor knew that was offside and didn't bother challenging for it. I'm not 100%, but I hope so.
It looked yards, but when you saw it back, and I got worried by the length of time VAR was taking, to be honest, because I thought, and it was tighter than I thought. So I would hope he wasn't, because although that leads to different problems, you can't rely on it these days. You just can't.
You can. On the second one, or their goal, I must admit, at the stadium, and this is the weird thing about Hampden as well, I feel like you have a very different viewing experience wherever you sit. Your sort of the depth of and the perception of where you are is just way off. Sometimes I felt at the game that McGregor should have been on his toes to come out and clear that ball initially. Now, you kind of caveat that with, it's Alan McGregor, he doesn't come off his line, he's 40 years old, it's probably unrealistic, etc. But looking at it back, it is just maybe 5 yards too far, and it does happen quite quickly. I do still maintain that maybe some of these keepers, like, I don't know, Ederson or even Joe Hart, as much as it pains me to say, who regularly are standing at the edge of the box, might be coming out and having a go at that, but equally I accept that it probably wouldn't have made it, and that might have even looked even sillier. So I don't think McGregor was at fault there. I think it's obviously the Barisic and Davies just being flat-footed and getting the ball over the box. And then, I think you're right. I think just getting caught being silly. I think Davies could have a much more of an understanding of where Miovski is. I also again thought maybe McGregor should have came out and just taken the striker and the ball when the cross comes into the box, but he is a little bit further out than I thought. Miovski's maybe 10 yards out, whereas I thought he was maybe 6. So, all in all, not great. Barisic, I mean, that lack of self-awareness that he has, it's almost like, we know he's so left-footed, but it's almost like he's not able to do anything on his right-hand side. If he can't even look over his shoulder or anything like that, he's just got no idea what's happening. And it's a joke for Kennedy to make up whatever it is, 10 yards or so. Absolutely comical. Completely understand your point about this character and bouncing back, etc., and that's great. Again, not to drag up the past, but remember that period under Gerrard just before he went, where we went behind every time and 7 games in a row and came and pulled them back. We can't keep relying on it. I don't think we're good enough to rely on it. So these defensive mistakes, when we've got maybe an attack that isn't as coordinated as we'd like it to be so far, it's just a combination, and it was not a good start. And again, I completely agree. It completely bust the stadium. I thought actually just before that we were looking like we can go and get a goal. There was a bit of pressure, and I thought get one before half time and we'll be fine. So it's a bit of a double sucker punch in that way. But just a completely comical goal to lose.
Yeah, and it was. I just thought a poor goal. And on the goalkeeper, Cammy, I'm kind of at the game. I thought McGregor could come and deal with it, but watching it back, I don't necessarily think that the blame lies with him. I did think that Alan McGregor at his peak saves that. The effort, good effort though, it was clever. I think it was gettable to peak Alan McGregor. Now we know he's not at his peak, but one thing I there was an incident in the second half where he makes a save and the ball sort of rebounds a yard or two and he's going for it and then he stops and leaves it to a defender who's expecting him to come and get it and then he clears it.
That was weird, yeah.
And I just think he is second guessing himself a little now. And things that he was just doing naturally, he's not doing because he knows that he's not what he was. And I think it's in his mind that he's not what he was. So instead of just he's taking sort of extra steps at time. That's what cost us the Duke goal at Pataudry. And it is just when you see somebody who's in their head a little bit, and he's never been that. He's always been really confident. He's Al McGregor, right? I just think it's noticeable. Look, it's the story in sports, isn't it? You know, your body at one point will say, sorry, I can't do what I used to do for you anymore. And I think his mind is aware of it.
Yeah, and it's funny because you talk about it, but, you know, we've seen it in other positions in the team. You've seen strikers, for example, who, you know, normally would do first-time finishes. They start taking extra touches because they're on a bit of a drought.
Yeah.
Or they start overthinking things,
Brian
as you
Kent,
say.
When he's not in form, you know it.
Exactly.
Because
so
he overthinks it.
Exactly. Or, you know, potentially dropping further and further back. And you can see midfielders who typically you would expect could play quite a cutting ball, be able to try and find a range. And listen, you know, we can talk about guys like Stephen Davis. There was times when he went through parts of that where you could see what he was trying to do, but he just wasn't pulling it off when he was trying to be able to try and get balls over the top or being able to try and just play, you know, the kind of passes that we know he's capable of doing. So you'll have that kind of dip in form now. I think what's going to be interesting, obviously, as we've spoken about previously, about bringing in John McLaughlin and what the next few months will look like. Because I totally agree with Adam, and I think yourself, David, where at first viewing of that goal, I was blaming McGregor. But then when you look back at it, if McGregor's going to come for the goal, right, the allowed goal, he has to go immediately. And he has to be able to kind of work out that offside trap is going to happen. I don't believe he's got the depth perception to be able to try and do that. And also, to Adam's point, it's uncharacteristic for him to do it. And I actually think what probably would have happened if he'd come out for it and the Aberdeen players able to take it around him, for example, then everybody's blaming Alan McGregor for it. So I don't think he's playing well. I don't think it's a new thing that he's not playing well. And I think the manager has to make a decision now as to whether or not we're going to stand by him and allow him the opportunity, as we said before, with the, you know, other positions of the team. We still give these players the time. They might contribute in other ways. It's just tough for a goalkeeper to be able to do that. Or whether or not even McGregor himself turns around and says, look, I'm just going to take a back step here. McLaughlin can step in, or, you know, whatever the setup is going to be. But he's within his head now doing it. And the minute he started blaming Barisic for that yesterday, I knew he's deflecting it, because he probably realises, as you rightly say, he should have done better at the shot. There's nothing much he can do in terms of the run, but, you know, at that point, he's committed. Do you know what I mean?
But I still think if we're doing a sort of blame pyramid here, McGregor the least, Davis a bit more, Barisic the most. I mean, it's absolutely shambolic from Barisic. It's bad, and unfortunately we've seen this repeatedly from him throughout the season. Now, we've seen this in the last couple of games, Adam. The midfield I didn't think functioned particularly well in the first half yesterday. I don't think John Lundstrom functioned well at all the whole match. I thought he was... I don't think he was quiet. I thought he was bad. A couple of Rangers players had to take bookings because of misplaced passes from him, and he just wasn't on it at all. But Ryan Jack really stepped up in the second half, and I thought began to sort of dominate the midfield, and he did the same at Tannadice the week before. And of course, it was him that got us back into the game. Lovely bit of play, actually. It's a really good goal. It's a well-worked goal. And it does take a deflection, of course, but, you know, fine, we'll take that. But it was when Rangers, again, just remembered, see, when you play football, you're actually pretty good at it.
And that's the frustrating thing. I agree with you. I seem to notice it more at Hampden. Again, I don't know if it's just because it's a cup final or a semi-final and maybe things are a little bit more even, but I noticed it a lot in the semi and the final last year, where McLaughlin in this case had the ball and Jack and Lundstrom just either can't get free or don't make the movement to get free. Yesterday, Ryan Jack spent an awful lot of time in the left-back zone because Barisic was a little bit further up. But it was kind of mostly when Rangers had possession, which I thought was a little bit weird. We weren't really using them in a kind of way that you'd expect. It meant the midfield was quite empty. I would have liked Jack and Lundstrom to be in the midfield, trying to kind of offer angles for McGregor or the centre backs through the middle. It felt like we just wanted to go wide so much. I don't know if that was a tactical plan to circumvent Aberdeen or not, but I felt like we really struggled with that in the first half. And then, as you say, into the second half, maybe things get, obviously Aberdeen have got the goal and we're kind of pushing, so things maybe get a little bit more one-sided for us, and we're able to attack a little bit more through the middle. But Ryan Jack was really good in the second half again, as he was at Tannadice. That play, like you said, just that sort of, he gets himself into that situation. He's able to do the 1-2 with Morelos. It creates space. We see that so much. We see that run, that move. Hadji's done it. Arfield's done it with Morelos or Roofe laying the ball off and they get into the box and score. I just don't know why it's the exception rather than the rule, to be honest. That's the frustrating thing that I've got. And that's, I guess, what we're hoping for with midfielders coming in, or we hope midfielders to coming in, is it's fine for Ryan Jack to have a good game, and it's fine for you to think Ryan Jack's had a great game, but also that possibly we want players that maybe do that more. Again, it could be manager instructions, David. We don't know these things. It could be the manager is instructing those players to do that, get the ball wide, play it simply, keep your shape in the middle. That could be what they want. Other midfielders coming in who are maybe a bit more naturally inclined to be more technical, be more creative, be able to thread passes through. If we get those in and things change, great. But it could be that we just want these type of players, but maybe a couple of years younger. I'm not too sure. I think we'll always have a bit of an issue with that. Some people love that sort of strong, solid midfield, if you like. I just think when we've got so much possession and we're camped in their half, it sounds a little bit silly given he scored the goal today. But Ryan Jack is not famed for his goal-scoring exploits. I know he loves it at Hampden, but he's not famed for it. So I don't think it's outlandish to suggest that if we're having a central midfielder who we want to get up and support and get into the box and score, etc., it's maybe not Jack's strong suit. So as much as he had a great game yesterday and he has been playing quite good, if we can get other players in who are maybe more naturally inclined to move forward, I think that playing through the middle we should start to see a bit more benefit.
He's in the team ahead of Lundstrom for me right now, though.
Absolutely,
I'll say that in terms of what he's bringing to the side, I think significantly more. And Cammy, the game, chances at both ends towards the end, and then a red card. Now you're a qualified referee on this week. I don't think there was much dubiety apart from Celtic TV commentator Michael Stewart, who, let's be honest, would pull off a tramp if it would get him attention. So you kind of know to take what he says with a pinch of salt. But I must admit, at the time, I thought it was a red card. I thought he went through him. I thought he went up high. And when I had a look at it back on a replay, I thought it was a red card.
Yeah, totally agree. I think one thing that we could always say that will always be fair on Heart and Hand. And if we get a decision we think we've got a lucky one, then okay, fair enough. But we'll call that out, right? We won't just assume that we've got the rub of the green and that's just the way it goes, or that everyone's always against this. But it was a red card. There's no doubt about it. He's the force of which he goes into is completely needless. And I thought it at the time, seeing it live, but then watching it back a couple of times, what I am assuming that he's thinking is that Sakala is about to take a touch, get away from him, and he just has to go in and either win the ball first or do that. Now that's fair enough. But the speed of which he goes into is far too excessive, and he just completely wipes him out. I think, if I'm being perfectly honest with you, I think we were lucky that Sakala, didn't have to go off, because it's a really, really bad challenge, David. Like, really bad. It's thigh.
Yeah, if we're talking if we're talking potential danger, that is one
Precisely.
That can seriously hurt somebody.
And again, apart from certain people with their own particular agendas, I think the unilateral agreement is that it was a red card. Incredibly stupid thing to do. And again, I can't, because I'm trying to look at the position of where it's happening in the pitch and where or not he thinks, like, if that's going through on goal, for example, okay, that's fair. But for me, even if Sakala does get the knock on ahead of him and he opens up that space, there's still quite a bit of room in the park that Aberdeen could try and regroup. It just felt like a last ditch tackle that he had to make, and fundamentally I think it's cost his team, if I'm being perfectly honest.
It was moronic. I mean, it really was, because as you say, Sakala's not really going anywhere. He's back to goal. He's facing away. Just jockey him, but you could see it. I mean, as he starts running over, I thought he's going to do him, and you can't leap into the tackle. You'll get sent off, and not deservedly so. And then we went to extra time, and Rangers substitutes made the difference. Brilliant play by Scott Wright, Hampden hero the last time I had him. I mean, really terrific change of pace, busts away from his man, and then the knock on Scott Wright, the deserved knock on Scott Wright, is final ball, but he picks out the perfect one. And then Roofe, most natural finisher, maybe Cholak these days, but he doesn't leather it, he doesn't panic. He also does that thing I love from strikers, which is he just stops in the box and
I was just going to say that, yeah.
half a yard. Oh, I love that, right? When everyone's buzzing about a really good striker knows I don't need to be running in here because they're all going there. I'll just stand here and it'll buy me a half a yard. And then just lovely little dink. And I suppose we have to temper that with then he gets injured again. Just bad luck, right? He falls and hurts his shoulder. We're told it's not a dislocation, but we'll find out the extent of it after a scan that was taking place today. That I just felt for him. I don't understand this thing. A lot of Rangers. I get that people are frustrated at somebody being injury prone, but I think when you see what happened, how you could get people on his Instagram going, "God, you're always getting injured." I mean, yeah, he has just scored the goal that got us to a cup final, and I suppose it's frustration because he's such a good player when fit. But it's hardly his fault that he fell on that complete dog's dinner of a pitch, and unfortunately has landed awkwardly. It happens.
It does, I guess. There's obviously just that frustration that he has all these calf injuries, etc., and people might just see him as brittle. I've seen a few people saying, does he just go off at the slightest twinge, etc. as well? It's just really difficult to get back from all those injuries that he's had. But yeah, for me, just when he comes on, I know Morelos did well for the goal, like we said, that sort of give and go, but I think Roofe's intelligence is just on another level from Sakala and Morelos, to be honest, just in terms of the movement when the ball breaks in the box. We've said this so many times, there's maybe a chance for Morelos, two chances for Morelos, the header and maybe the one where he's sort of not quite clean through, but he sort of checks back and blasts it, and then there's a couple that Sakala had. Be pretty confident Roofe tucks away one, maybe two of those, just in terms of how he plays, how clinical he is. It is a huge shame that he's had these injuries, etc., but that little pause that you mentioned there, just to everybody else is just going to run into the box expecting this cutback. Let's hope he pulls it a little bit further back to me, one touching in. The good thing about him is he doesn't need, we speak about Sakala, we speak about Morelos needing 4 or 5 games to get up to speed. He just seems to come in and look as fit or as not fit as he always has. He doesn't need much time to get up and running, which is good. Fingers crossed that it's not a long-term one and we can get at least some use out of him, but I do understand people that get frustrated that he's cost whatever it is, 4 million pounds, and I'd assume a pretty decent amount of money, and we haven't been able to get as much out of him. It's maybe more of a frustration rather than a you're a terrible player, this is a waste of money type thing. So I can see both sides, but yeah, for me, I think anything that we get out of him in the next whatever it is, if he's only here for 4 months until the end of the season, or if he keeps the other year and we keep him for another year, anything we can get out of him, I think is a bonus, provided that everyone else can get up to speed as well.
Yeah, definitely. And after that, we almost got a third through Sakala. We did rely on an excellent save from Alan McGregor right at the death, which would have been bloody frustrating to go to penalties, but we're through, and we've got the final to look forward to next month. Let's then turn, Cammy, to some of the other stuff. First of all, the time of recording could have changed by the time you listen to this, folks, but by the time of recording, no new signings in yet. Frustration growing, and I think understandably so, because we've sat here and we're all very pleased that we won. And I can already hear some of our more optimistic listeners saying, "Oh, I can't believe how negative you were." But, these are issues that we're discussing most weeks. We're certainly pleased with the results, pleased with the upturn since Michael Beale came in. But these are long-term issues. You get 1 month in the season to rectify some of them, and we haven't done it yet.
Yeah, and I think it feels a lot to people that it's like as if there's a build-up before the window opens in January, that we've got X amount of targets and we should be going out and getting them, and they're in within the first couple of days of the window. And whilst that's lovely in theory, in actuality it's very different, because dependent on your injury list, dependent on individual player performances, we've already mentioned that obviously we've got some guys who are coming out of contract at the end of the season, and what happens within those negotiations. Your targets and your requirement could change. It could change, week to week. I think the thing for me, David, is it's not just about being able to try and get the player recruitment sorted early, purely just because we know, and as we just discussed there with Kamal Roofe, you've got a player who comes back from injury, plays a really small period of a game, and then gets injured again. And we don't know how long that will take. Now, that does cause frustrations within us as a fan base, but presumably also the group, because Kamal Roofe proved his worth yesterday by scoring, the goal that's taken us into the League Cup final. But that injection of new blood and new personnel coming into the group, I think, provides its own lift. And maybe that's what we're talking about here, that maybe we're seeing some of the existing playing group there's a little bit, I don't know if it's stagnant, I don't know if there's, issues in there that need to be addressed, but new players being able to come in and play consistently, which we've not had too much of from our summer intake, shy of a couple of players. The majority of the group has been out for one reason or another. So I think it's really important for us to be able to try and get that done now and get it done early. I think it will get buy-in from the fans. I know what you're saying. It feels a little bit negative. I just think we're being realistic. I don't think we're shying away from stuff that we need to be able to talk about. But we would get a lift from that as well in terms of being able to try and bring someone in, addressing the key parts of the team that need resolved. Adam mentioned it earlier on in terms of whether or not we've got players who are at the tail end of their opportunity at Rangers, and are we going to replace them? The midfield needs work. We know that. And I think that, like you say, we're going to have to try and get someone in. I would like, ideally, within the next few days at least, because I think it just gives us a nice following bump having made the League Cup final. And we can continue to look to see how we can bring some of those guys in to certainly continue on with our league campaign. The picture could look very different in a couple of months, as much as I don't think it will do, because Celtic seem to just be on a fairly decent run themselves. But we need bodies to be able to come in. Kamal Roofe's a perfect example of, you can bring someone back, but they get a knockback, you're going to be missing them again for a good period.
Yeah, and Adam, I think partly my frustration, and certainly from speaking to some of our listeners, that they feel this, is that we do accept you're unlikely to have 6 players January the 1st, right? And that, yes, sometimes it takes a bit of time. We get all that, identify the right players, but it's always this way with Rangers. It's similar like when there's a price point, Rangers always come out in the high end of it, right? And it's that frustration. It's like, it can be difficult. We're always one of the clubs that seem to find it the most difficult, and I think after a while that begins to get a little bit. Really, every single player that you want is a complicated deal.
Yeah.
Really, how does that work? And then that's when fans begin to say, no, hang on a minute here. It can't always be as difficult, because it just seems that we tend to find it the most difficult. If there is a difficulty rating, we'll be at the higher end of it. And after a while, I would begin to say, well, is that the processes? Because, Rangers will say a lot, it doesn't matter what happens at other clubs. And to a degree, it doesn't. But they are an example for supporters, and other clubs seem to be signing footballers.
It's really, I think it's really complicated. And I think we do get the wrong end of the stick sometimes. I think Michael Beale saying the other day, whatever it was, over to other people. I think that's fair enough. That doesn't mean, I guess, that we're 99.9% of the way there, and these players will be in as soon as they take this contract. I take that to mean recruitment team has met up with the manager. We've confirmed what the manager's requirements were. We've got this player back. The manager is happy to go with that player, and then we're moving on to negotiating. And like you've said, we do tend to drag these things out. I have said, I think it was maybe on Extra Update last week, David, that anyone expecting Norwich to roll over and give us Todd Cantwell for 200 grand when he is probably a 10 or 12 million pounds player last summer, I think is off their head. So maybe that is taking a bit of time, because we're saying, right, we'll give you 1.5 million, and they're saying, no, you'll give us 3 or 4, and we're kind of going through that. At the same time, I think we could probably get out in front of it and agree a pre-contract with Todd Cantwell if it is him, same as we did with Suter and Jordan Jones way back, and whoever else. Can we come out and do that and then force the ball into Norwich's court? But then at the same time, if he's a pre-contract do him and his agent want more money, more signing on fees than they would if we're actually paying the money to Norwich right now? So I think there's a lot of complications behind the scenes that we don't see, but I absolutely take the point that it always seems to be complicated for us. On the flip side of that, no one is really sure who these targets are. I think Todd Cantwell seems to be the only one that looks to be crystallised.
Well, just ask Michael Beale, he'll tell you.
I know, but even the Tom Davies one, there was that one comment and then the noise has disappeared. There's never been any noise from any journalists round about Everton or anything like that. I don't think that...
I think they've got a fair bit going on at the moment.
They have a bit going on. Maybe you'd expect Tom Davies to be sending the SOS signal out, given the scenes that we've seen on Saturday night, but it's a bit weird, isn't it? Because we take so long to do things, but then but it's all such a big secret as well that no one really knows what is happening behind the scenes. And as we've seen, we tend to fill that vacuum with negative thoughts, I guess, rather than positive thoughts. Maybe we're spending our time getting the right player in, etc. It doesn't really factor into our minds given the last couple of years and people's perception of recruitment. So yeah, it is a little bit strange, but I also think it's maybe a bit more complicated than we think, rather than Michael Beale saying, right, okay, that's us, we're ready to go, and we just pull out this bag of money and give Norwich or Everton or whoever it is exactly how much money they want. But I'm definitely as frustrated as everyone that we haven't got players in right now. Similarly, I think this is a busy week as well. Therefore, any players that are coming in, that Michael Beale said himself the other day, there isn't going to be much training this week because it's just sort of game focused, etc. So it's great to get players in the door, etc. But in real terms, I'm not sure any player coming in even today is having an impact on Wednesday's game or even Saturday's game. So maybe they want to look at it as a bit more of a long-term thing as much as it's frustrating for us.
Yeah, and I'll hold my hands up to this. You know, I grew up in the 80s, just buy somebody. We did it all the time. You know, it was like 6:15, let's sign somebody. And that's what we did. And I miss it. It was fun. So I'll admit that maybe it's my own natural inclinations, but that was the way I was raised, Adam. There's not much I can do about it. It's I'm set for life now. Anyway, moving on, which we will do, to Kilmarnock on Wednesday night, Cammy. Dell ball on a plastic pitch. Now, normally I would moan about that pitch, but I have a feeling it's going to seem like a fucking vintage Wembley compared to what we just played on.
Yeah, it'll feel like a carpet rather than a ploughed field, but... yeah, I think it's you know, I think Kilmarnock, you know, from everything that I was able to see from the highlights of their semi-final against Celtic, I think appeared to be able to try and put out a decent performance. But yeah, this is one of the small benefits of being able to try and have artificial surfaces in weather conditions like we would get in Scotland in January. That hopefully it's not too bad. Right now, I think probably like you boys, my main fear is potentially picking up any injuries off of it.
Yeah,
I think we can play on it. I think we've moved away from this idea that it's a reducer, that it's a benefit for the home team who play on it all the time. I think we've just get used to it now. And there's certainly worse surfaces that we've played on, you know, other than what's happened in the rugby part, yeah. But at the same point, I just want to make sure that we don't have any impact injuries. I was personally worried about Hampden, about a player going over on their ankle and potentially hurting a joint injury. Turns out that happened, but higher up the body became a Roofe just purely because of circumstance. But that's what I was worried about with an uneven surface. With Rugby Park, it's more just because of a player landing awkwardly, not dissimilar to how obviously Roofe ended up getting his injury. But again, it takes its toll on the ankles, on the knees, etc. But as you rightly say, compared to what we had to play on in Hampden, it will be night and day.
I'm not expecting a classic, Adam, if I'm being totally honest. We know the way Kilmarnock set up. We know the way McKenna's side sets up. It'll be frantic. I hope I'm wrong. I hope Rangers go out and put a sensational display. I expect us to win, but I don't necessarily think it'll be a fabulous performance to do so.
No, I don't think so. Maybe something similar to Tannadice. Just in terms of, I thought they were really well organised defensively. Quite a little bit the Celtic game, and is it Daniel Armstrong? I can't remember his first name, but he looked pretty decent for Kilmarnock on that side. I think we were linked with him weirdly last week as well, so he looked quite interested on that side. We'll see how that goes. Not expecting a classic. It would be nice if, as a Rangers team, it would be nice if we went out and got a couple of early goals in an away match and just made it smooth, and we were able to get comfortable and get a few players rested rather than having to come on and get into the speed of a game. That would be fantastic. Fingers crossed it happens. But no, in terms of players, etc. as well, I don't know. I think there's maybe a couple of players there that don't look like they can go 3 games in a week. Jack Lundstrom, maybe Sakala. The amount of running that Sakala got through yesterday was...
I thought we haven't really mentioned, I thought him and Kent were really good yesterday, that they just kept going and they were a constant menace.
Absolutely. So Kent just seems to be superhuman and can do that every 3 days for the rest of his life. But Sakala, I think maybe it might be one that either he starts on the bench or he comes on. I'm not sure. I guess with Roofe now being probably definitely out again and Cholak being a while away, it looks like it will probably be Morelos up top as well. So that'll be interesting to see. I think we might see Scott Arfield from the start, as much as everybody will be sighing and groaning because he really should be super subbing it. But I think we'll probably see him coming in just to give some of the players a rest. But other than that, not expecting massive amounts of changes. But yeah, hopefully we can go on and get a few goals early doors and start to look ahead to the weekend.
And of course, Adam will be back later in the week with Heart in Hand Extra, in which he will look back at the Kilmarnock match and ahead to the match at the weekend against St Johnstone in the Scottish Cup. For full build-up to those matches, full coverage of those matches, go to our Patreon site. It's patreon.com Heart in Hand. That's patreon.com/Heart in Hand, where for just 50p per week, you'll get up to 5 shows every single day. Honestly, you'll love it, and it is the best investment, the cheapest entertainment that's out there. The most fun you can have with your clothes on, etc. Right, I'd just like to thank our executive producers in London, Mike Lee and Paul Myers, and to thank my 2 guests. First of all, Cammy Bell.
Thank you, David. A pleasure as always.
And Adam Thornton.
Thank you.
I'll be back here next week after the St Johnstone game. As I say, tune in for Heart in Hand Extra on, is it Thursday or Friday this week, Adam?
Good question. Thursday it'll be, actually, because we've got the game on Saturday, yeah.
Right, so Thursday this week for Heart in Hand Extra, and as I say, back here next week for this. Until then, everyone, have a good one. Take care. Bye-bye.